What happens when the fire is not only in the nerves, not only in the muscles, not only in belief, but in the system that drives your rhythm? You sleep less, you wake early, you push harder, you become more irritable, you chase goals aggressively, you enter intense bursts of productivity, and then suddenly the same fire that drove you begins to burn you. This is where the ninth house becomes deeply misunderstood, because most people hear ninth house and think only of philosophy, belief, destiny, higher learning, and long-range direction. But in body mapping, the ninth house also governs the hips, thighs, tailbone area, sacral region, sciatic nerves, and pituitary linked hormonal functions. So when Pitta rises here, the disturbance does not stay limited to sharp pain or inflammatory heat in the lower body. It can also push the whole person into an overstimulated, overdriven, overproductive, and ultimately overheated rhythm of life. And that is the real teaching of this slide, because Pitta is hot, sharp, penetrating, and inflammatory. In the ninth house, Pitta does not just inflame tissue. It can inflame purpose, timing, ambition, endocrine drive, and the way a person pursues the future. So when the slide speaks of hormonal expression through pituitary overstimulation, what are the signs? High cortisol states, aggressive goal pursuit, reduced sleep, early waking, irritability cycles, intense productivity bursts followed by inflammatory burnout. That is not random. That is a very coherent Pitta pattern. Too much fire does not always first show up as collapse. Sometimes it shows up as performance. Sometimes it looks like discipline. Sometimes it even looks like success. But underneath it, the system is overheating. The person is moving through life with force, not balance, with drive, not regulation, with intensity, not sustainable rhythm. And that is why this version of ninth house Pitta is so important for healers and astrology students. Because if you only look at obvious pain, you will miss the subtler problem. The person may be functioning in an inflamed way long before they fully break down. Now, let us reason through the planets shown here, Mars and Sun. This is an extremely telling pair for this kind of pattern, because both are Pitta planets, but they express drive differently. Let us begin with Mars. Mars governs muscles, blood, heat, acute inflammatory responses, sharp force activation, irritation, and push-driven action. Mars is the planet that says go now, move now, act now, force through. So when Mars influences the ninth house field, I expect not only inflammatory pain in the sacral sciatic corridor, but also aggressive forward momentum, forceful pursuit, sharper goal orientation, and a tendency to override the body in service of movement and achievement. Mars is not patient fire. Mars is urgent fire. So in this hormonal expression pattern, Mars can show up as, I must keep moving. I do not want to slow down. I am pushing through fatigue. I am irritated when my direction is obstructed. I perform intensely and then I crash. That is Mars working through rhythm. Now add Sun. Sun is also fiery, but Sun's fire is more central, identity-based and authoritative. Sun governs heat, vitality, intelligence, bones, feverish excess, and a concentrated solar drive. When Sun participates in a ninth house Pitta field, it can give not only heat in the body, but heat in identity, heat in mission, heat in purpose, and a need to live directionally with force and certainty. This is where the pattern becomes more revealing. Mars pushes action. Sun centralizes purpose. So together they can produce a person who does not merely work hard. They may become driven by an overheated relationship to direction itself. They wake early. They chase intensely. They tolerate less rest. They become irritable when momentum slows. They produce in bursts. And because the ninth house also governs higher direction, their whole identity can get fused with striving. That is why the slide's overall summary is so strong. Inflamed hips, burning sciatic pain, rigid ideology, and driven hormonal rhythm. Direction becomes forceful and overheated. That last line is the real diagnosis. Direction becomes forceful and overheated. This is not merely a health pattern, it is a life pattern. Because the ninth house governs how you move toward meaning, belief, growth, and future purpose. So when Pitta disturbs this house, the person may not simply become uncertain, as in Vata. They may become overdriven. They want growth, but they want it now. They want clarity, but they become intolerant. They want purpose, but they pursue it aggressively. They want success, but they run the system too hot. And then the body begins to mirror that same truth. The hips inflame. The sciatic pathway burns. Sleep reduces. The body wakes too early. Irritability increases. The stress axis stays activated too long. Productivity rises in intense surges and is followed by inflammatory exhaustion. This is where serious interpretation matters, because many people praise this kind of pattern at first. They call it ambition, they call it discipline, they call it a strong mission, they call it spiritual drive or professional hunger. But if the underlying rhythm is inflamed, then the strength is unstable. That is the key insight. An overheated system can produce a lot, but it cannot always sustain what it produces. So for healers and astrology students, do not stop at there is Pitta in the ninth house. Go much deeper. Ask, is the person's drive becoming inflammatory? Is the sleep being sacrificed to ambition? Is the hormonal rhythm being pushed into overactivation? Are they waking early because of healthy clarity or because the system cannot cool down? Are they productive or are they burning through reserves? Is their direction aligned to so or merely forceful? That is real reading. Because this third Pitta expression is different from the previous two. The first Pitta version focused on heat and inflammation in the hips, thighs, sacral region, and sciatic corridor. The second focused on inflamed nerves and overheated conviction, dogmatism, and reactive philosophy. This third version focuses on endocrine-style overdrive, pituitary overstimulation, goal aggression, sleep disruption, irritability cycles, and burnout through forceful direction. That is a distinct layer. So when you read this pattern, see it clearly. Mars brings force, provocation, overexertion, acute heat, and push-driven action. Sun brings central fire, mission intensity, identity-based drive, and a rhythm that can become too hot to rest. And in the ninth house, that may manifest as burning sacral sciatic pain, inflamed lower movement axis, reduced sleep, early waking, irritability cycles, aggressive goal pursuit, rigid directionality, and productivity bursts that end in inflammatory burnout. That is rigorous interpretation. The body says, I am overheated. The rhythm says, I cannot slow down. The purpose says, I must push harder. The outcome says, you are burning faster than you are rebuilding. That is the real signature here. And once you understand that, your language becomes more precise. You stop romanticizing intensity. You stop mistaking overdrive for alignment. You start seeing when the fire of purpose has crossed the line into physiological and psychological inflammation. That is the lesson. The ninth house is meant to guide a person toward higher direction. But when Pitta overheats it, direction becomes a furnace. And when direction becomes a furnace, the body eventually pays the price. If this kind of deep Jyotish Ayurveda reasoning helps you understand charts at a more serious level, subscribe and stay with this series, because this is exactly the kind of pattern recognition healers and astrology students need to develop. And if you want a personal reading on your own chart, for health patterns, soul path, relationship dynamics, or life direction, you can book a consultation through astrovagmi.com. I will see you in the next one.